So I've been talking about the hologram recently, more videos, and I do feel as though I will be doing more on these, more videos on this, the idea of hologram, understanding that our mind is a holographic representation of data that we perceive through our senses, and the importance of understanding that. This is my recent video I posted earlier today, because I've come to realize this is the utmost of importance. If you understand how stories mold reality and the stories that we believe within human consciousness, and that is actually what molds reality, then we can come to change the world, right? All of our perceptions, all of our beliefs are working together collectively to create this reality. So when we come to see that we have all these stories that have been manipulated through time for benefits for specific groups of people, we can come to understand that we can just stop believing these things and, change the story, change the world. And this invariably has a lot of problems, right? What is cognitive dissonance, right? Cognitive dissonance being the inability to accept something that is outside of your own specific reality or your understanding of your reality, right? Science has to go through this all the time. We have many stories about, I know, whatever. The earth is flat, but no, we sailed and we didn't fall off any edge. Now the earth is round, right? The earth or the sun revolves around the earth, and now our story is that it's the other way around. It's the earth revolves around the sun, right? The main purpose of telling these things is that, one, yes, they are stories, and the story changes over time, but also the resistance that new stories face, right? Cognitive dissonance. When you have a new story, when you have a new understanding of how things work, then you're automatically confronted with people that resist this change. And I did an equation on this before of, right, the amount of energy put into something is the amount of solidity that belief has within your own identification of self. Complicated way of saying it. But basically, as an example, so you go to school for so many years, right? What happens while you're at school? You have to study things, right? You go home, you go to classes, you have to take in that class, you have to take notes, you have to do worksheets. You go home, what do you have to do? You have to study. You have to spend more time, more energy, more effort into taking in this knowledge and accepting it. Now again, take in university. And in university, not only are you putting in the time and effort for study in class, but you are now spending money, right? Money as a unit of measurement for energetic exchange. So basically, you're giving even more energy outside of the study, the work, the classes, the quizzes and tests, the difficulties you have to go through with dealing with other people. Like, all these things are investments of energy. So the more you invest into an idea or a study, right, or a speciality, or all these things, to become a doctor, you have to go through so many schools, so many classes, spend so much money. So you eventually end up identifying with, I'm a doctor, I know these things, how dare you question my identity? I spent all this money to learn these things, how could I be fooled, right? This identification with our own knowledge and the investment of energy put into that knowledge. Hey, hello there. And Gene, recreation time, reprogramming our minds, yes. Where was I now? So yeah, like the solidification of education. So the amount of energy and effort and money we put into studying something, right, it becomes a part of our identity. Because how is our identity function? Right? It's our thoughts. It's how we perceive reality. It's how we talk to ourselves, think to ourselves within our mind about how reality functions. Where do these voices come from? Where does this understanding come from? It comes from education. So this is why no matter what, any kind of form of education is a type of brainwashing that's beneficial, or it can be destructive, right? It can be either or. It depends on the intention behind it. It's good to see you're at school. I'm just talking about school, right? What are you studying? I'll get an answer at you at some point. There's a huge lag. Like, I'm in Guatemala and the internet's a little funky. And so I'm like observing myself minutes ago. And so it's kind of tripping me out a little bit. But please feel free to ask anything. Like, guide me along. I just kind of did a test of live streaming and just started rambling. And so any guidance towards this rambling would be beneficial and that steered me in a specific direction. So yeah, education automatically influences our identity of self. And so hence we have this cognitive dissonance. We have this biasness about how reality is perceived. Yes, I live in Guatemala for 5 months now. And then I lived in Honduras for 1.5 years before that. And then I lived in Guatemala for 4 years before that. So I very much like Central America. I'm currently living at Lago Atitlan, southwestern Guatemala. Thank you, Elizabeth. Oh my gosh. Right, so how this is all connecting together. I don't know what you guys got from the beginning, but this is where I'm trying to make videos trying to concretely lay everything out. Thank you so much. I love Guatemala. It's a very special area. The tradition, even though I have something about tradition that I did in the video earlier today, but the Mayan heritage, the Mayan tradition, the ceremony and stuff is quite magical, as you say. Very special. You didn't say magical, it's special. But it is very special. It's a very powerful place. Thank you. But yeah, so I guess the point I was still trying to construct is that through education, we come to an understanding of how reality functions. Through the repetition of this information, right, it becomes our own mental vocalization, right? We think to ourselves, right, this is chair, that is door, this is wall. This is a very simplistic way of looking at it. But it becomes a voice in our head that tells us what reality is. And as time goes on and as we become normalized to this being the way it is, it develops a cognitive dissonance. It becomes hard to change. Hence why some of us need psychedelics or near-death experiences, something drastic to shake us out of that solidification of imagination, right? Which is, from my understanding, all that reality really is. Right? It's a more solid dream state. It's imagination solidified, orchestrated by story. Right? This is why we have history, and this is why we do have our education. Exactly. Thank you, Ingene. It's so much tied to language as well. Exactly. Government, entertainment, right? Entertainment, I love that one because it's so easy. Enter, entra, Latin, entra, to enter. Even in English, it's right there, enter. Tain, retain, contain, to withhold. And then mente, Latin, mind, to enter and retain the mind. Entertainment, why it's such a big industry. We spend hundreds of millions of dollars making movies that spell a specific spell, cast a spell within our minds about how reality functions. And because it is all story, right? We have an education system that tells us a story, a history, how things function based off of science, and we must believe it because of an authority. But in reality, it is just how did you put it? Yeah, it's a big casting of spells to get the most individualized consciousness under the same spell, right? To kind of rope everybody together, to believe a specific belief. Because the more people, it's a numbers game, the more people that believe a specific belief, the more that belief becomes solidified within reality. And this is why things change so much. And because of, stay on topic, but because of the ease of all this new information, the age of information, there's so much out there, we can retrain, re-educate ourselves, that we have, where something used to be in the past, but it's not. Let me see if I can find it in here. I don't know if I can remember that word. Doesn't matter. People say that CERN has to do with it, and I don't remember the name. Anyways. Yes, exactly. Spellcasting. Language. This is why English is such a prevalent language, because now I teach English here in Guatemala, and so I'm starting to understand it more of the difference between Spanish and English, and how English functions, and why English has rules, but also a lot of things that go outside of the rules just to make specific vibrations happen within words, or vibrations. Because when you look at morning and morning, what do you mean? Well, good morning, and when you're mourning of the passing of a family member, it's the same vibration. And so every time you say good morning, depending on where your mindset is and what's happened to you, you can re-instill the vibration of mourning a past one, or mourning the sacrificing of your dreams and intentions to go to work that you don't enjoy. There's many different plays of words within all this. So yeah, definitely spellcasting by the use of words and language. And the thing is, it's not all external, right? It's also internal. I believe it was Eisenhower that said, whether you think you can or you can't, you are correct. Right? There's a lot of power in how you think about yourself. And I remember getting some hate before when I mentioned depression, and that depression was a choice. And people are like, no, it's not a choice. And I noticed the game, and I'll get into that after this, but like trying to share with this woman on Twitter who had a big following, like, no, it's a choice because you're choosing to continuously think sad thoughts or destructive thoughts or focusing on the negative that's happening within your life. And because you're choosing to do that, and also choosing to listen to sad music, I'm depressed, I'm going to listen to the sad music and amplify that sadness, right? I used to do it too. I was very Scorpio, I'm a very emotional being. And so I used to do it in my teenage years and during the things that happened to me, also listening to sad music and getting the emotions. But, because then what is emotion? Energy in motion. Now you're putting an energy out within your field and influencing the reality around you again. So definitely, it's not just an external speaking into existence, but also thinking into existence. And because just to continue on with this woman on Twitter, where she eventually banned me because I was saying that, is because her whole following and her whole online persona is based off of this victim mentality. Woe is me, this is the bad things that's happened to me, and she gets this whole following, and now it's become more of a solidified aspect of her identity. Right? She must be depressed because she got famous off of choosing this depression. So it's very interesting. All these different little subtleties within our own consciousness and how it is all based off of choice. Right? I come to this new definition of the solidification of imagination. So as you think, as you believe, as you dream, it becomes. Just like in the first video I was saying of like, this is why in our history that we understand, that we've been told, the story we've been told of the past, which can be heavily manipulated and easily manipulated, why, Christianity went to such great lengths to take over other cultures, right? Because their story needed to go into the minds of the people to become more solidified. And why we destroyed cultures. One of the first things we do back in the day was when we invaded a new country or a new people, we would try to destroy their culture. And this is a moral thing. If you destroy the cultures, now they're left with nothing, and they're more apt to receive your culture. Because now they don't have one, right? Their power was just dismantled. And now they are more likely to receive yours. But then again, now they receive your ideas, beliefs, story. They will now take on your story. Now you have more people, more individual aspects of consciousness with a specific belief system within their translation of reality that is now on your side. It feels as if the editing or educatoring can cause one to outline things into focus. Outline things into focus. I wonder what you mean by that. Because it's definitely, I do feel like education is an editing. Definitely. Because just like when we're kids, we're open to imagination, right? We can believe and see things that our parents can't. In time, through the influence of our parents and family members or the adults within our lives, and then, of course, through the influence of education, that grand imagination becomes boxed in, right? Edited. Solidified, right? The solidification of imagination. And so definitely the educatoring is definitely an editing process, right? Because again, like the way I see it, light comes in. I like using the example of the eyes because that's the most simplest, right? Our eyes take in light, go into our nervous system, go into our brains, and then it becomes translated into form, into imagery, imagination, imagery, and then projected onto the screen of consciousness to be observed. So what is the translation, or as you say, editing? Exactly, solidify or outline. And so it's like this process has become hijacked, is the way I see it. There's people out there that knew how this works, and they decided to hack or hijack the functioning of consciousness, conscious creation of reality. And thus we have an education system that edits our imagination so that we have a large collective of people that believe the same things and think the same ways, so that a specific intended reality can come into manifestation. Beautiful. I need my glasses. Where's my glasses? Thank you, Inji, for sharing so much. Maybe we're gonna have a discussion one of these times, because it's like, and this is why I did the video on why it's so important to understand this. Because the more of us that understand this process of conscious manifestation of light, right, turning light into form, that each individual has their own selective belief systems, and us as a collective create the collectively shared reality. If we understand how this works, and we see that we've all been bamboozled, brainwashed, fed a specific story that disempowers us, the more that we see that, and the more of us that we can come to understand it, right, the more we can change. Like I said, it's a numbers game, so the more people that believe a new story that is an empowering one, is one that can see society can function, that there's a need for a new education system with a focus on how consciousness functions, how to handle emotions, so emotional intelligence, how this all works, investments, which is just, again, more energy management. The whole system's based off of efficient energy management from internal to external, I think. And so it's like the more of us that see this, there's this need for this, and that we need a new story, the more that story becomes a reality. That new story of, wait, no, humanity is here to be stewards of this world, and that this can be a Garden of Eden. And that we ate from the tree of knowledge, to speak biblically, but we got knowledge, educated, what did you call it, educatoring, editing reality to a specific form. So we ate from the tree of knowledge, which boxed in a specific experience reality for all, which actually limited us, and by limiting us, we disempower ourselves. By disempowering ourselves, we seek authority. And we seek authority. Some form of authority will sneak in and, vis-a-vis the world today, ruled by figures of authority. And yes, you're right. We wanted to observe the hijacking. That's why we created it. To observe the hijacking, but then I also think, because I think it's all about educating, learning through experience, and so we wanted this challenge, right? Because growth doesn't come through comfort; it comes through challenge. And so we challenged ourselves. We created this hijacking in order to observe it and challenge ourselves to see if we can get out of it, right? Can we figure it out? Can we understand how it works so we can get out of this challenge and restructure it? So yes, I definitely agree with you, Elizabeth, that we wanted to observe, we chosen, because I think everything's chosen. There's no good or evil, right? It's the divine light, the intelligent light creating all things, and so everything that's seen as evil is still the intelligent life creating challenge, creating resistance in order for others to overcome. It's this big game of resistance, what's it called? Friction, because friction creates energy, creates static charge, and static charge is what fuels creation from my point of view and how I chosen to understand things. Here's to make one wise and looks good for food. Eh? I'm good food. I don't know how tasty I am, but understand. So the witch's measurement, which is measurements, or witch's measurements. Interesting play. Because I kind of look at money as a unit of measurement for energetic exchange. As you give, so shall you receive. There needs to be a measurement of balance, right? The world getting interesting? It's definitely, right? The manifestation wants us to wake up. This game's over. New game. Time for a new game. Something more fun. Something more enjoyable. There's always going to be challenge. There's always going to be an opposing force to create that friction, that charge that propels us forward. Yeah. I have a meme on that I posted recently, and it was very informative, and it was talking about gold being physical representation of that measurement, and then fiat being the political creation of that measurement, and then Bitcoins being the mathematical form of that measurement. So I'm very big into cryptocurrencies as well, because I definitely getting off the U.S. dollar. Anything that's government controlled, I don't think is beneficial, because government, to govern the mind, is to seek control over the holographic simulation of reality, to controlling the imagination of the people. Well, good night, Elizabeth. Sleep well. Enjoy yourself. Thank you so much for joining in and sharing. Thank you so much. Rest well. Yes. Silver. Silver as well. I don't know if you know a man named Cliff High. He has some videos on Rumble. You can find him on Twitter, but I found him years ago. And it makes a lot of sense what he says, but he says that silver will be like the new, and there's a few silver bugs out there that say these things too, about the value of silver has been suppressed. And so now it's like, I haven't checked the price, but it's been hovering around $20, right? And, beautiful, you do know Cliff. So I don't need to go on anymore. But yeah, that silver will eventually go to $600 and beyond, just because of its use in a new technology, because of silver's ability to connect or interface within the magnetic fields, and thus our magnetic field can influence, so it'll be a part of the new technology, if I remember correctly what he said. Yeah, I love Cliff. He's amazing. And we'll see. It's all a time thing too. It seems like it's all accelerating, but more things are getting, revealed. Right? The time of revelations is upon us, and it's not meant to get into the whole fear thing, but revelation is just revealing of secrets, revealing of the story that's been containing us, restraining us, the human potential. Right, as well. But for me, I've also always pondered And, I also understand the limitations of my understanding of space and if it's real or not. But the idea of like meteorites having gold, silver, platinum, these rare minerals that are found on Earth, like at some point, perhaps, because there's so many different ways this can go, but that we'll eventually find minerals in space and not have, thus a greater supply, and the value goes down. Gold, sun, silver, moon, base for everything. True. Actually, you make an interesting point, Gina. Like I don't quite understand everything you're saying there, but this is reminding me of. There's a crypto project actually, and she lives here in Guatemala. She lives here at the lake. She's from the States, but she made a program that goes into those watches that like measure your heartbeat and stuff. And so she developed a program that measures when you get into the state of coherence. And so when you're feeling the good feelings of love, or when you're connected to a higher state of being, right? The coherence, the heart-mind coherence. That's in those moments is when you start mining a specific crypto. And her whole point was to create a currency that only gets created when you're in divinity, when you're in states of bliss, of connection. And I thought that was an interesting process. And like, so it's monetizing, but not, it's making a currency or turning heart coherence into a currency. And she's going to be buying land, and the only people that have this form of currency can go there, because then it kind of limits, it kind of filters out who's allowed, which, but at the same time, it's an interesting project. Let me see if I can find it again. I don't remember the name of it, but she lives here at the lake, and I talked to her, I met with her, and it's a really interesting project. Susan Brown, that's her name. Token of Me. I'll put it in the chat if you're interested in looking into it. I have to put the HTTPS. Hopefully that works. Token of Me. Exactly. You understand. And this is why it's like not about, Bitcoin's the one and I'm a Bitcoin maxi or Ethereum or Cardano, whatever it is. Right? It's all interoperable. Because humans like creative uniqueness, right? People like Nikes, people like Adidas, people like specific things to accentuate their own identity. And so that the best currency is not one currency, but a slew of currencies that are all interchangeable, right? The price might fluctuate, but if you like Shiba Inu, because you love that community and you love that brand and how it looks, then that can be the currency you use. And, if you want to buy something and somebody doesn't like that Shiba Inu, it can automatically be turned into whatever currency that they enjoy. So it'll be based off of, no government influence. Ideally, a limited supply, a capped supply, so that you can't just print money out of thin air. And, I have this idea. There's a bunch of crypto people here in Guatemala, actually. Yes, it is the community that gives it value. Because without community, there's no one that wants to use it. Because a lot of value of crypto specifically is through the use of it, right? If there's no community, there's no use. And this is where people frown on trading, but no, trading gives it value, gives the currency value. You want to trade more as a community, because you got to think about it. Again, energy, any currency is just a unit of measurement of energetic exchange, right? Even looking at the etymology of currency, right? Like water, liquidity. There's a couple other terms I can't think of, but it's very much similar to water. And what happens when water stagnates, right? It gets stinky, it smells, it goes bad. Water wants to move, It wants to go up and down through the waves, go through the rocks so it can become mineralized, energized, enhanced. Money being another, currency being another form of that, it wants to move and go up and down and gather energy as well. Yes, there you go. Banks and riverbanks. Exactly. You know what's going on. You understand. Yeah, banks and riverbanks. And that's the thing, because I also, banks direct the flow of the currency. Yes, but I also kind of see them as like a parasite, right? Because what's another form of a liquid? Blood. It's like I also look at currency as blood. This is the main imagery I go with, because I look at society as being a social organism, right? And each being is a cell, and we're part of different communities. You can look at communities as organs. It's a whole thing. It's a whole 50-page book I've been writing so far. And it's small because I'm splitting it up. But anyways, that ideally currency is supposed to be blood to distribute resources, right? Just like blood distributes oxygen, minerals, different things throughout the body into all the different cells so that the cells can function efficiently. But we have parasites, of which could be banks or governments, certain figures that pool the liquidity into specific spots and don't let it move. And thus it develops like a cancer or disease within the social organism. Exactly, right, the current. Also energy, right? Electricity has the same etymology of current and resistance, flow. Because I think it makes, thank you. I've been working on this analogy because I think it makes so much sense once we understand, we as a people can understand it. We are one big organism. And that currency is not bad, money's not bad. This is just a seed planted within our minds to make us not want it. And only evil people have money. But no, it's blood. You want blood. You need resources. You have a vision. You need resources to enact that vision. And you have a vision for a reason, right? We're all connected to divinity. Where does inspiration come from? Right? To be inspired is to be in spirit. And if you don't have the resources to follow your inspiration, then you're a dead cell, right? And then the whole system, the whole organism suffers due to that, right? Yeah, I need to finish that book because it's called The Greatest Reset. I have The Greatest Facade, which tells us which is trying to go into the old story and how it's taken over and hijacked consciousness, and then The Greatest Reset, talking about how to create or how to see it as a social organism, to recreate, re-stimulate the organism, right? Resuscitate it. It's still alive. We can still do something great with this world of ours. Right, as above, so below. And it's fascinating, too, because even if you, like talking about crypto, if you look at coding, if-then statements is very much how our mind functions. If this happens, react this way. This is how we get programmed. As above, so below, the whole fractal thing, everything's just a fractal. Again, hologram. What is a hologram? If you take a small piece of the hologram, it contains the entirety, but